Hello, welcome back to another video tutorial here at GeekatPlay Studios. My name's Gary Miller. Well, you folks have been asking me for several months now, give me some more UV mapping tutorials, and you've also been bending my ear about show us Hexagon's painting tools. Gary, why don't you create a model and use Hexagon for a change to paint the texture onto the model. Why don't you give us some real working models, Gary? Something good. So, all right, your pleas have not fallen on deaf ears. I'm finally going to knuckle down and do some painting with Hexagon's painting tools. I think for the most part I've been reluctant to do a tutorial like this because I'm so used to Cinema 4D and body paint for my UV mapping and painting needs that I just really didn't want to spend the time learn hexagons. But it's pretty easy. The tools are very straightforward, and it's fairly intuitive, and so it didn't take but about an hour to play around and get familiar and get comfortable using them. So we're going to create a model and texture the thing from start to finish right here in Hexagon. So I'll actually create a model here, something that's decent that will be of use to us. I'm going to create a cube, come up here to select edges, Control A to select all the edges, vertex modeling, and come down here and use the third extract around tool, and I'm just going to dial in an inner radius about like that. What I want to create here is a wooden crate. So now I'm going to select faces, and I'm going to select the center of all 6 center faces, just like that. Come over here to sweep surface, hit my space bar because I want to extrude inwards, just about like that. And I'll hit my enter key to validate that. Now what I want to do is to stretch this out. So I'm going to click on that face. I'm going to hold down Shift and hit plus on my keyboard. On the right side of the plus button on my keyboard, hit it again and hit it again 3 times. Now I'm going to spin around here. Also, I'm going to hold down my Shift key and click on that one. Click on that one to add that to my selection of faces. Select that one and select that one. Now I'm just going to drag my box out till it looks like, a nice wooden crate. All right, let's come over here, create another cube, and just to put it where I want it, lay it right down there on top. Resize it down, lay it right down there on top, and select that top face there, and bring it down. And let's stretch this out a little bit. There we go. And now I'll rotate it. There we go. Now I'm only going to create one of these. It would certainly look far more realistic if you created these on the sides and placed them all over your box. But just to save time and get to working through this tutorial, I'm just going to make one. Okay, I'll call this board. There we are, and I'll call this crate. Alright, I'm going to select both of these. I'm going to Control D. I'm going to duplicate that. Hide those two. I'm going to take these and weld them together. In this tutorial, I want to go through the process of UV mapping and painting these using 2 different methods. One, using an object that has 1 or more parts welded onto it, because that plays a factor when we go laying out our UVs. And 2, UV mapping and texturing or painting a model that has two separate pieces to it. So let's start off first with the single form. Come over here to UV and Paint. Let's apply a cubic projection to it. Now, if you don't know what this checkerboard pattern is, and if you're not sure on all that I'm doing here, and if UV mapping and painting is new to you and you've never had any other source of introduction to this, I would strongly suggest you look at some of my other earlier tutorials on UV mapping, get an understanding of that, and then this will make more sense to you. Alright, so this looks like a good checkerboard pattern on that side. The material looks to scale. This is a little stretched, so I'll bring it in. And the top looks a little compressed, so I'll bring it up. Let me zoom in a little bit, maybe stretch it a little bit more. Bring this up. And that looks good. Okay, let's come over here to a split screen and see. Hide our texture. And let's see the layout here of our UV map. I'm going to go ahead and validate that. Come back over here. Now let's click on cubic projection again. If we click on this one, it lays everything out right here. If we click on the second one, it stacks opposite facing sides, one on top of the other. And if we come over here to this one, every single polygon has its own separate place on our UV map. So I think I'm going to choose this one here because the left and right side will be one on top of the other. The front and back will be stacked on top of the other, as well as the top and the bottom. So now that I've changed the projection setting, I'm going to have to go back here and change the orientation of my texture. And notice, let me zoom out on this on the UV side. Notice when I'm doing this, it is scaling the UV map. Whoops. It is scaling the UV map properly. And that looks good. Top looks fine. Even if I'm off a little bit and it's not perfect, that is of no great consequence because we're going to put on here a wood texture. And wood texture is far more forgiving than, say, if we were to use a brick pattern. Okay, so here are the sides, here's the top, and these are the two small ends, and that's pretty easy to identify. Alright, let's come over here now. We're going to create a new material. It's called new, and we'll call it wood, and we want a texture, so I'll create a new one of 1024 by 1024. And we're done with that. Let's come over here to our paintbrush tool, and we don't need dynamic geometry. We can move that down. Over in the texture area, this first square icon is for color. And if I want to paint a color on my box, then this is what I would use. Bring the opacity all the way up. Well, I don't want a color, I want a texture, so I'm going to click the second one, which brings it to the foreground. I'll click it again, and it will open up the small texture library that comes with Hexagon. Well, I've already loaded in a texture that I want, but you can simply hit load and navigate your way to wherever you store your textures. And let's choose a texture. Oh, what size is this one? 4.5 megs. 4.5 megs. Well, I'll use that one. Okay. Now with my paintbrush, I can paint the texture onto our model here. But I think it would be far easier if we used a different method. And that is, I'm going to come over here to the paintbrush tool, and it will fill the entire thing, the entire model, in with my texture, so I don't have to worry about the paintbrush. Now let me move this over just a little bit. Enable our texture. I'm going to hide the grid. Now you see what this has done. Let me make these UV lines black so they're easily visible. It has put the texture exactly, I mean exactly where it needs to go. We've got some small problem here. These ends here of these polygons, because they're flat and they're not orientated correctly, we're going to have to do a little repair work on this. Now, it's nice that Hexagon puts the texture only where it needs to be. The downside to that is that if we want to modify any aspect of our UV map, we go, let me undo that. We now have moved our UV map off of our texture. And we'd have to go and redo it all over again. But one thing I learned playing around with this today is if we make right at the very beginning, before we do anything else, if we put our UV map, make our UV map so large that it completely covers our UV texture here on the back, on the bottom, come over here to our paintbrush tool, and now hit the paint bucket. Now it fills the entire area in with our texture. Well, that's what I want. So I like that. I'm going to select all of my the entire UV map, and let's just shrink it down and put it right back here where it needs to go. Now, no matter what I do with this, where I move it, it's always going to have my texture on it. And that makes life, well, just a little simpler for me. Let me orient these a little bit better. Take these. Actually, what I'm going to do is I'm going to flip everything 90 degrees. So the layout is in line, the grain of the wood is in line with the boards of our model. And that looks better. Okay. The UV tools in Hexagon, while they do work pretty well, they are not perfect. And I'll show you why it does have a few shortcomings. If you look at the faces on this, you see that, like right here, it doesn't look too good. It doesn't look like the rest. And I've covered this method, or this predicament, several times in some of my other tutorials, especially the tutorial on making a book. Whether or not you want to make a book or not, that's a helpful tutorial just to go through and see how to correct these problems. But we're going to correct them now. Essentially the problem is if you let me grab this one. I'll grab these two edges. Let's find it here. And you see there is space between them. And in that space between them you see the texture, and up here you see the texture right here. But on this face, and the one on the other side as well, let's find that, See, they are flat. One is lined up right on top of the other, and as a result, it has just a little sliver of texture in between these two edges. So I'm just going to grab this one and, whoops, no, I don't want to do it there. Excuse me. I want to do it here. I'll just pull it out. Now look on the left, the immediate effect. This was before, and this is after. I'm just putting more of my texture onto that polygon. And I will do the same for this one. I'll just pull it out. Now sometimes you have to be careful, because if you pull one out one way, for example, I'll play with this one, and it will change this large face right here. See? Both of them are being manipulated at the same time because they are both connected here. So let me go and make some adjustments to this one here. And as you see, I'm affecting the large face, and it's not very much. So I'm not going to have a heart attack over that. And I'll just change the top ones, and then we'll move on. There we are. Let's see what this one looks like. Let me choose both of these. Oh, yeah, I've got space between them. That's fine. This one definitely needs my attention. I'm going to turn off my texture. It's easier to see. There we are. And these two are just fine. Okay, I'm going to come over here into this perspective view and click on faces. I'm just going to select a bunch of faces on this box. I'm going to hit Control A a couple times to select the entire thing. Now I'm going to hide it. Now I've just got my board isolated from the rest of the model. Well, there's several parts of this that will never be visible. One are the ends, so I'm just going to delete those. Let's spin around. I don't need that. And the bottom piece, it'll never be seen, so I'll delete that. So all I need is just this shell. So I'll re-enable the rest of my box, come back to a split screen. Now there's several things. There's one thing particularly noticeable about this, and that is the orientation of our texture runs straight across the top, right over this board that crisscrosses the top of it, and it keeps on going, and that's not realistic at all. So what we need to do is we need to change the orientation of this board, not on the modeling side, but on the UV side. So with it selected, now I'm just going to rotate it, and that looks far more realistic. And I can move it around wherever I want. I can place it wherever I want onto our texture map, because it is a separate object. Remember, this was the piece that we welded to the front, to the top of our box. So essentially, I can move it anywhere I want. I can even, coming back over here, let me select those, grab my paintbrush tool. Let's just, for the sake of fun, select a different texture. Let me abort that. Let me choose my box here. Plus A, plus, not plus A, Shift plus, select all of that, hide it. Now let's come over here to our paintbrush tool, and with our new material, let's paint a different texture on this. validate that. Okay, you notice we're running into the same problem that we did on the edges of the box. These edges here are flat and they need to be expanded out. So I'm just going to scale them out just like that. Come back over, use my paintbrush tool. And let's paint our texture on it. I can probably make it a little bit smaller. There we are. And paint some over here. Paint some there. Paint some there. Let's validate that. Let's re-enable the entire box. Now, granted, that doesn't look real cool, but it just shows you that you can paint pretty much any texture, I would presume, onto your model. Okay, so that is using the UV and painting textures on a model that has more than one piece added to it and welded together. And that's going to be the end of this tutorial. We're going to make a second one where we texture another model that has its pieces separate. So thanks for watching here at GeekatPlay Studios. My name's Gary Miller. Have a good day.